Hello and welcome to Part D of Module 1 of Digital Finance. And here we're going to focus on digital transformation. And the first point before we look at the specifics is the importance of tying in any digital strategy to the overall strategy of the organization. And I really like this picture because if you think of each of these little dots, we've got human resources strategy, product development strategy, research and development strategy. We have operations and efficiency and marketing and governance, and all of them interact or interfere with each other, and they all have to be aligned to go in the right direction. But you can see just how easily it can be to get it all tangled. So strategic alignment is the dream. But if you're like me and you've worked in a few different places, you will see that sometimes the claim of what an organization aims to do in terms of its strategy or its vision or its values doesn't always match with reality. So I've been in places where they say we must be innovative. Absolutely. And so you think, well, what are the culture, the systems, the rewards in place for that? Well, they say that there's going to be a bonus for success, but there's also a penalty for failure. So innovation requires risk taking. You're doing something you've never done before, so there's a chance of risk. But most organizations punish failure. They don't promote people who fail, they only promote winners. So you will not get innovation where you have a culture that does not tolerate mistakes or failure. It is misaligned. Often companies say, oh, we want everyone to work as a team, but then they reward individuals with great bonuses and they talk about superstars. So there's lack of alignment. You hear that people are the most valuable asset, and yet the accountants are the first to say we need to cut costs, let's reduce headcount. So that's not really in sync with what we're saying. So your HR strategy isn't matching your accounting finance strategy. We're committed to our values, and yet we reward people who cut corners and do whatever it takes. We hear about 5-star customer service, but of course that's costly and we cut costs. So we ignore our customer. We don't solve their problems. We don't fix those warranty claims. And the worst one of all is your call is important to us. And it's so important that we're going to put you on hold for 30 minutes because we haven't hired enough people to answer your actual phone call. So that's misaligned as well. So with that introduction to the importance of aligning strategy, we'll have a quick look at these objectives, 3 objectives for this module worth 20% of your exam. And the key one here, I think, links most closely to objective number 3, adoption of digital technology. So we want to adopt, and that's transform from where we are to where we're going to achieve the organization's strategic goals. So we don't just do cool technology just because. We want to transform our digital way of doing things in order to achieve our strategic outcomes. So section 1.10, organizational strategy, it's very, very brief. It talks about what is strategy. And strategy is the decisions we make day in, day out to decide where we're going to, and then the processes we follow. What's the strategic environment and the goals we're trying to achieve. So it's just a brief introduction, and that ties in very closely with strategic management accounting and GSL. Then we get to section 1.11, digital transformation strategies. And an example of a strategy is mapped out here. We start off with a needs analysis. Then we choose our objectives. Understand and document the risks. So we want to make sure that we don't totally screw it up or waste a huge amount of money. We run pilot programs. That's that agile type of thinking where we test and explore, get that feedback and iterate and improve. Then we ask employees for feedback and hopefully other stakeholders. Time for implementation and analyze the effectiveness of implementation. Now, if you've studied any type of project management, for example, SMA Module 4, you'll see that this process is just as valid for a digital strategy as for any other type of strategy, operational strategy the organization wants to pursue. So some mistakes we have to stop and avoid. We need to avoid jumping in too early, because people are going to be resistant to change. They're going to be scared and not have a lot of knowledge. So don't go too hard, too fast. Take people on the journey with you. And I always use the train example. If you're a train, the engine, if you don't have the carriages all attached and pulling along, and they don't go with you, you're a leader without any followers. Also, avoid plans that cause excessive disruption. So too much change within an organization can just make mistakes, annoy customers, frustrate your employees, and stress everyone out. And just as importantly, and this is the whole key about linking it to your overall strategy, don't just implement technology for the sake of it. It must line up with meaningful change towards achieving your overall objectives. So figure 10 gives you a digital transformation methodology, and I do love the imagery here. And we see butterflies, and of course they're beautiful, but I want you to dwell on it for a minute. How does it feel to be a caterpillar? That's a pretty big change, and you've got to go into a cocoon. So it takes time. You've got to eat, and you're a very different beast at the end of it. So it's not all wonderful. It would be quite concerning and confronting, I think, to go through that level of metamorphosis or change. So start off, assess the opportunity, figure out cool options, and then you have to be able to link this to your overall strategy and create a vision. You have to sell that vision to the employees, to the shareholders, to the relevant stakeholders to prove that it's worthwhile. And then you need to mobilize them, get them active. Design your digital roadmap. And then we come back to this: implement and test a prototype. Don't just unleash it without checking and testing. And then check your stakeholder engagement. And then it's time to transition, implement. And often you have to run two systems simultaneously while you're checking and testing. And that's costly and tiring. And then it's time to implement, final transition, turn off the old systems, and now you are the butterfly, time to improve. Now, interestingly, and I've grabbed this table from the Global Strategy and Leadership textbook, this lines up very closely with the transformational leadership discussion that happens in that module. So, for example, Cotter has an 8-step change process, which he identified. And if you don't follow these 8 steps, then your change effort, whether digital or any other kind of strategy, will fail. So you need this powerful guiding coalition, and it's linked to this idea of mobilizing the stakeholders. You need to create a vision. As we see, that's really important here. You need to plan and create short-term wins, which comes in here, implementing and testing that prototype. Consolidate improvement and institutionalize. So that's this transition and ongoing evaluation and improvement. So you'll see these close overlaps to this transformational literature in links to leadership and strategy. So a good example is given in example 1.13 with a business with a focus on wood manufacturing type equipment. So check that out. And then we go into this discussion of, well, what drives value? Value drivers and what's important. And value drivers are anything that adds value. They can be cutting costs, making things more efficient, growing the market. And from a customer perspective, value drivers are things that improve the quality of the product or reduce the price of the product. Both things will make a customer happy. So areas we want to try and create value: operational efficiency. We want to do things with fewer inputs for greater number of outputs, and we want to do it faster with less time. So less cost, less materials, less time. We also want to deliver products to the market faster, generating new products, new services. We do that through agile concepts. We want to innovate our products. We want to keep improving the services that are available. And if you think about a car, in the old days, there was sort of just a car, and then over time we had things like air conditioning and power windows and power steering and ABS brakes. And nowadays you've got your Bluetooth and you've got your in-dash satellite navigation, consistently innovating and improving and increasing the level of quality, reducing the level of failures. So that brings us to section 12. How do digital transformation strategies help achieve our goals? Now, there's a little bit of, here's this interesting metaphor of total freedom and breaking down the chains. Interestingly, something like over 80% of digital transformation projects don't work out. So don't always believe the hype. But some benefits of digital transformation, if it's done properly, including saving time, so you do things more efficiently, improving the quality of the analysis you're doing, therefore improving decision making, reducing bad debts in the accounts receivable area because you're running better analysis, better credit scoring to avoid problems with customers, better prediction of outcomes and faster. And in areas such as audit, increased security. And a great thing, this one I actually like the best. In the old days, auditors would have to sample transactions to test things were in order. But when you do things digitally, you can check every transaction and you can check it as it happens rather than waiting for the auditors to come at the end of the year. So you improve your risk, minimize mistakes, and check everything, which is, I think, a fabulous outcome. So with all this push towards innovation and transformation, why do some companies struggle? And the number one reason is they do it because it looks good, the optics, the public relations. So they, oh, look at us, we're going to the cloud, we're being digital. And they don't really understand it. They don't really care, but it sounds cool. The second problem is hampered by your baggage, your legacy infrastructure. Your old systems work, but they're unwieldy. Unraveling that, developing a new system, keeping them running in parallel for a while, and then releasing to the new is the caterpillar to butterfly thing. It's hard work going from one to the other. Another reason is no urgency. Normally, companies don't like to change unless they're going bust or their competitors start destroying them. So unless there's that urgency for change, nothing happens. Along with this urgency comes a fear. If we do a new thing and it's quicker and faster, we charge less money to the customers, we'll lose, we'll cannibalize our own products. A lack of experienced innovators is also a problem. Now, culture clash is where people don't like change, and people sometimes like it, don't like it, but don't forget, the structure of the company, like I introduced at the very start, can cause problems. If you have a company that says it wants innovation, but actually penalizes mistakes, of course you're going to have a culture clash. No one's going to want to innovate and be that first person who then gets yelled at or sacked or never gets promoted because of a mistake. A lack of ownership and sponsorship links to that. And when we have a strategy that doesn't link to the overall goals, it's compartmentalized, yeah, it's going to struggle to be successful. And then there's governance roadblocks. People say, oh, it's too risky, I'm too scared. What about privacy? So there's a lot of slowing of things with governance, and then a fear of being different is also, it's just funny. Strategy is always about doing things differently, but let's all do it the same. Are other companies doing it? I don't really want to try this thing in case, which goes back to that fear and culture clash. I don't want to get in trouble by my bosses for making a mistake. So what do accountants have to do? Well, we should be leading the digital transformation because so much of it, we need to know the systems, and a lot of it is financial related, and we have to find the funding for it. And we can also lead by, like in the image here, transforming paperwork into digital resources. So if you've got any digital areas, you need to transform those. Accessing data, helping others have access, doing the analysis, budgets and forecasts, finding the cash, automating accounting processes, and also helping others automate processes. One thing about accountants is we're across all the different parts of the business. And so if we want to automate it, we can talk to all the relevant parties to see all the activity flows. And so we're in a good position to give good advice. And it's important for accountants to learn how the business actually operates. It's quite amazing how many accountants run the spreadsheets. They don't really know the business. They don't know the products, and they don't know the industry. So go and learn it. Then you can add value in the automation process. Now, we want to keep pace in a fast-moving world, but there's a lot of red tape that tangles us up. And this includes having really complex ways of doing business, because how do you automate such complexity? If there's variations and changes and multiple computer systems all interacting, that's really difficult. If you have really strict policies that can never be changed because of a strong hierarchy and infrastructure, then that's going to slow you down. If your business units don't talk together, if you don't have the right IT infrastructure and people, and disparate architectures, so different systems throughout the organization will cause trouble. So some questions that you can ask to seed discussion and plan effectively are listed in it's interesting, it's called figure 1.12, but it's actually a list of questions. So how shall we adopt? How shall we identify? How shall we get started? These are good probing discussion questions where you can sit around with relevant groups. You can talk to employees, you can talk to stakeholders and say, what do we need to do here? So make sure you don't just jump straight to the technology and tell everyone how it's going to be. Talk to them, find out more, and identify their concerns. Areas you need to be across and understand, and therefore explain to others: the IoT, cloud, big data, analytics, all we cover in a lot more detail in later modules. Then there's a page which has more fancy words than you normally get in a module. And so you need to know, and you don't have to know all of these in Module 1, but these get introduced in later modules throughout, such as RPA, robotic process automation, IoT, the Internet of Things, wearables, SaaS, IaaS, and PaaS. Get a glossary, put them in a spreadsheet, put the page number, find out what they mean, do a bit of web research, watch a few YouTube clips, find out what these things mean because they are talked about a lot. Then it's time to figure out your timeframes. Now, earlier on, we talked about having those small wins, set up those prototypes, try new things out, and then embed it. So immediate deployment, straight away, you want to move down this path. But then there's the 1 to 3 year short-term deployment, and then long-term. That's where we're planning 5 years, 10 years into the future. And of course, the technology, we don't know what's going to exist in 10 years' time. But if we have a mindset of innovation, it will be easier. As it becomes more normal, we will walk towards it. Now, a good example here. 15 years ago, no one had heard of the cloud. 10 years ago, people had heard of it, but they didn't understand it. Now, every single one of you is in some way interacting with the cloud every day, whether it's using Microsoft programs or Google programs or storing all your photos from your phone up in the cloud. It's just instinctive. So if you're forward-looking and always planning, always adopting, you won't be 10 years behind. Some companies have been using chatbots for a decade. Others are only just thinking about using it. Some people have been using Agile. I started looking at Agile development in the early 1990s, and it's becoming a popular approach again. So these are not new things, but if you have the mindset towards them, you will be readier to act. And so that brings us to the end of Module 1 and the end of Part D. And as I said before, Objective 3 is the key one here, adopting digital technologies. It's not just a matter of saying we like this technology and turn it on. There is a lot of process, project management, and culture change and helping people change and deal with resistance and stress of change to implement that successfully. All right, so good luck with finishing Module 1. Time to pile into Module 2. Check out the module quizzes and see how you go. I hope you're keeping on track. Thanks.